A single word never tells you what it really means on its own. The word run can mean jogging, a rip in a fabric, or a continuous line in a drawing. You only get the point when you wait for the next words to lock it in. Meaning does not sit inside one word but slips between them like linked cars on a train. Because of this, you can never find a single word to show who you are. You are just pushed from link to link in an endless chain. You expect your speech to run like a clean, unbroken stream. But the stream always breaks. You trip on a word, forget a name, or let a slip of the tongue get through. This hiccup is not a simple mistake of the mouth. It is a sudden tear in the fabric of your daily thoughts. In this tiny pause, the neat picture you paint of itself falls apart. This crack is the gap where the unconscious breaks through, proving that you do not have your hands on the wheel of what you say. Before you are born, the world already has a set grid of rules and words. This system works like traffic laws or the rules of a game. You did not build this setup, but you must use it to get anything done. To ask for what you need, you have to pack your wants into its ready-made boxes. Fitting into this layout is the only way to become a human subject. But since standard words cannot hold your true feelings, this system always leaves something behind, leaving you split from the start. You build your identity by linking words like the teeth of a cheap metal zipper. But this track always skips a tooth, leaving a tiny gap. This gap is the exact spot where you fall out of your own speech. If you pull on this split, the whole track bursts open and your story comes undone. This missing tooth shows that your ego is just a weak seal over a hole, ready to rip open at any moment. We start out feeling like one solid ego. To become a speaking subject, we must be split. Think of cutting a piece of cloth. The cut is where a new shape starts. Language does this by making a clean break through you, turning you into a barred subject. You are left split between your words and the raw physical life you cannot grab. Because of this break, you work like a machine with a missing part. You have to keep running just to find the one specific piece that will make you feel complete, which is the cause of your desire. You do not own the words you use to think. The language of everyone else comes first, building your thoughts from scratch. There is no private, hidden self waiting inside you before words arrive. Every phrase you utter is simply the speech of the outside world running through you, shaping what you think you desire.
Your thoughts are not locked inside you like gold in a private chest. You think with words you did not invent, words that passed through 1,000 mouths before reaching yours. The unconscious is not a secret room in the brain, but a shared structure running between you and the world. This external order is what actually creates you.
When you talk to someone, you usually believe your words come straight from a deep inner core, but most of the time, they are just empty noise. This is empty speech. It happens when you repeat automatic phrases just to keep the conversation going, like a mechanical doll that repeats the same lines to keep the listener at a distance. It feels as though you are sharing something real, but the words are cut off from your actual presence. It is like sitting in an idling car. The wheels do not turn, yet you keep burning fuel. This chatter keeps you safely stuck in place, so you never have to face what is really going on.
Think about writing a letter. You must choose words that already exist in the language. The moment you press the pen to the paper, the written ink on the page stands in for you, but you are not that mark of ink. This permanent division is what makes you a split subject. You are forever split between the raw act of speaking and the actual word that represents you. The two sides can never merge to make you whole.
Speaking splits you into two places at once. First is the statement, a flat package of words already written and frozen on the page like a letter in an envelope. Inside this dead script, the word I is just a fake stand-in, a cardboard cutout representing your ego. Second is the live speaking itself, the active movement of the voice where speech is actually built. The gap between this live voice and the frozen text is where you actually operate. You can never fit inside your own sentences because the one speaking is never the object being spoken about. When you hit the same wall in your life, you are not just having bad luck. Your ego wants to steer away, but your unconscious drives you to crash, seeking a painful satisfaction from the very thing you lost.
When a grandfather clock keeps chiming the wrong hour, you know a mechanical jam is forcing the gears. The same loop happens in your life when you fall into the same trap over and over again. This repeating pattern is what we call the symptom. Your ego always tries to wipe out this behavior because it hurts, but you are still hooked on the strange payoff that comes from the loop. This payoff is a painful satisfaction, and the symptom is the track that feeds it into your body. To understand how you get a sense of who you are, look at how you keep score. Think of carving a single notch on a wooden stick to mark a point you won. That notch does not look like the point itself, and it does not look like you. It is just a bare, empty line, but it holds the place of a real event after the moment has passed. In the same way, you enter the world of language by grabbing onto one simple, meaningless mark from the people around you. This first scratch is a blank stamp, a single mark that acts as your anchor. By taking on this mark, you get the foundation to build your ego.
A simple engine runs just to keep itself going. But you do not stay on this safe, balanced path. You constantly do things that wear us out, like picking fights or chasing things that make you miserable. You do this for a heavy, painful payoff. This payoff is a dark satisfaction, and you only get it by hitting the same bad wall over and over. Pause. 1 second. You are built to run your own engine into the ground, driven to break your own peace. Your unconscious is not a vault of hidden secrets. It operates like a printing press with a loose type, leaving physical smudges that trip you up.
A wooden peg in a joint only fits because of a physical notch. This notch is not an extra part, it is just a gap where wood was carved out and discarded. You are built the same way. You are split by a physical notch, a lasting gap where a piece of us was cut out. When you chase after a new status or a possession, you are trying to plug this gap. But the object that causes your desire is not the plug you chase. It is the empty notch itself, the structural loss that causes you to keep searching. The notch must stay empty for the system to keep clicking forward.
Language cannot work without physical parts. Think of a single groove cut into a metal disc. It is not a fuzzy shape, but a sharp, clean dent that forces a metal needle to ride in one exact line. Pause. 1.0's. That physical track is the letter. It is stamped directly into you, cutting a hard path that guides how you speak, how you feel satisfaction, and where you look for the cause of your desire.
A slip of the tongue seems like an accident of speech, but this is no breakdown. It is the only moment your speech works perfectly. Because your ego loses control. Through this crack, you speak as a split subject. The mistake is the truth breaking through.
We think words stick to things like labels on jars, but when you speak, your words do not blend together like a sliding smear of sound. Instead, they hook together one by one like individual links in a metal chain. Underneath this chain, meaning does not stay locked in place. It slides along continuously without stopping. You cannot get a solid grip on any thought until the sliding meaning is temporarily pinned down at a single spot. When you speak, you do not make gaps between words. Your mouth just lets out a steady stream of sound. To make sense of this noise, language chops it into pieces, just like a scribe dividing a run-on script into separate words. Because this stream has no built-in lines, the same sound can be sliced to mean something entirely different. You think you are saying one clear thing, but this sound-alike trick turns your speech into a picture puzzle. When these sounds split in the wrong spots, the unconscious slips through, proving you do not own your speech.
We think our stubborn loops are riddles to be solved. But these slips mean nothing in themselves. They work like a jammed gear that grinds down your energy, which is your raw body satisfaction. For you as a split subject, this grind keeps you going. If you make it stop, your whole world feels empty.
Before you first speak, the entire system of language is already running. You did not build this grid. Instead, you are dropped into a pre-existing structure where each link points only to another link, representing you to the rest of the chain. Because your thoughts must travel along these preset tracks, you do not run the system runs us. You never hide a feeling in the unconscious. A feeling is always felt, like a physical shudder. Only the words that trigger it are hidden. You cannot wipe out a raw feeling, but your mind can lock away the specific word that sparked it. The feeling itself remains completely real and does not lie about its own strength. However, because its original trigger is blocked, the feeling has to slide along a chain of associations until it hooks onto another, harmless word. This shift tricks your conscious mind. When you feel the full weight of the reaction, you look in the wrong place and blame the harmless word, like getting terrified of a harmless household object, instead of the actual danger that triggered the system. When you experience a heavy blow, your mind buries the specific word for what happened. But while the word is pushed down and hidden, the raw feeling tied to it gets cut loose. Think of this like tearing a page out of a book while the loud bell that was rung to announce the reading continues to echo. The words are gone, but the noise drifts. The loose feeling cannot stay unattached, so it quickly binds to a completely different, harmless everyday word. This is why you can suddenly feel a deep dread when you say or see a normal word that has nothing to do with the original shock. The feeling is real, but it has been shifted onto a new word. When you lock away a specific word, it does not stop working. It stays fully active beneath the surface, running like a hidden water wheel that you cannot shut down. Because this hidden word is still spinning, it forces all your other words to bend and steer around it. Your speech has to make constant detours to avoid making direct contact with this block, leaving you split. You are left talking in endless circles, driven by the very word you cannot say. When you buy a coat, the thrill dies the moment you take it home. You immediately start looking for a new pair of boots, not because you made a mistake, but because you are caught in a chain where one thing always stands in for another. Your focus slides from link to link because you do not actually want the item itself. The real target of this sliding is the cause of your desire, the empty spot that keeps the loop running. You can never grab the thing that stops the search because the system is built to keep you moving. When a word is cut off from what you can say, it does not go away. Instead, the unspoken word writes itself onto your body. Your hand stops working or your leg will not move. This is not a real sickness, but a silent message spelt out on your flesh, turning your body into a page for the word itself. You trust your feelings because you feel them directly in your body. But while the raw feeling itself is real, its connection to what you think caused it is wrong. It works like a warning flag on a steam boiler. The flag is truly raised, which is a real fact, but a broken lever makes it point to the wrong pressure valve. You glue your true bodily feelings to these wrong targets to hide what is actually going on. Your ego uses this layout to block you from facing your division.
While everyday feelings trick us by sliding from one target to another, anxiety never lies because it has no false object to hook onto. It works like the sudden hiss of steam right before a boiler burst. This feeling only shows up when the cause of your desire gets too close, breaking down your safety and leaving you completely bare. You think your life moves forward in a straight line, like sand sliding through an hourglass. But your mind does not work this way. Your ego always goes backward, rewriting past events to make them fit the present. This straight line is just a trick to keep your story from breaking down. A spoken sentence has no meaning until you reach the end. Only when the final word is spoken does the sense slide backward, locking in the meaning of the start. This is how time works for you. The past does not build your present. The present reaches back to write what came before.
A stream of speech runs ahead with no set meaning, leaving you with no place to stand. Then a final word drops in like a key turning in a lock. This last word clicks backward through the whole line, locking the empty gaps shut. This late stitch pins you into a fixed spot after the fact, making it look as though you had been there from the start.
For you as a subject, your history is built backward. First, a blank event happens without meaning. Later, a second event acts like a stamp that reaches back and writes meaning into that empty slot. Only then does the first event become painful. The pain was not waiting there from the beginning. It is created now.
A twisted paper loop has no inside or outside. You are not a container, but the empty gap formed where the paper twists. This fold is where the system fails to match up, splitting you at the turn. Words slide like an endless loose fabric. Language needs a quilting point to freeze this movement and fix meaning backward. Without it, you lose your grip on a world where nothing stays still. Meaning only locks when a sentence loops back, like a latch falling into place. But because the chain of language stays open, what you mean keeps sliding underneath, never stopping. You do not slide. Instead, you are represented by one word for another, showing up only in the gaps between them. To speak about yourself, you must use words that do not belong to you. Think about trying to show who you are by selecting from a list of options that someone else wrote down. The second you choose a word to stand in for you, you split yourself in two. One side is the living person trying to tell the truth, but the other side is just the flat tag written on the page. You can never make these two halves fit. This gap is why you are always cut off from yourself, which is why we call you the barred subject. When you look at your reflection in a mirror, that shape is parked on a wall outside your own body. Because you have no built-in, inside way to feel your own shape as one whole piece, you must grab onto this outside picture to get a grip on yourself. This outside mold acts as the very first blueprint for your ego. You must use this flat image to patch together a steady sense of who you are. Because this blueprint is sitting out there on a wall, you end up building your ego on a base that is locked outside your own skin. At the start, we do not have a built-in sense of who we are. We feel like a messy bundle of loose parts and random movements. To fix this, we look at our reflection in a mirror and see a single, neat, solid shape. We grab onto this clean image and pretend that it represents us. This frozen, outside picture is what we call the ego. The trouble is that this ego is not our real self. It is just a flat image sitting over there, while we are left trying to squeeze our messy lives into a polished portrait. By mistake, we set up our whole lives inside an illusion. Because of this, your ego makes you think your mind is a locked room, shut off from the noise of the world. But the words you use to think show that this wall is not there. Every secret thought you have is built out of language you took from other people. This means you do not have an inside space cut off from the outside. Instead, both sides run on a single loop, like a leather strap that has been cut, given one twist, and glued back together. If you drag your finger along this strap, you go from the outside to what looks like the inside without ever crossing a line or going over an edge. Your deepest private self is just the world outside running on this one, unbroken surface. We build the ego as a stiff, hard shell to cover up a deep gap inside us. Because we refuse to accept this gap, we try to keep the shell totally rigid. But a stiff shell cannot bend when life hits it. It can only crack under the pressure. The moment the shell cracks, the empty gap underneath shows through, and this sudden leak sets off a sharp wave of anxiety. This anxiety is a warning sign, just like a red flag popping up on a steam boiler to show that the pressure is failing. Defending the ego is like tying that flag down so we can ignore the problem and keep running. It does not fix the boiler. It only hides the warning sign until the whole machine grinds to a halt. To show who you are, you must use a word to stand in for yourself. The moment that word pops up, it takes your place. It is like a candle flame being snuffed out when a glass is placed over it. The glass remains, but you, the subject, have slipped away. This is how you become a barred subject, fading out behind what you say. When you write a letter, your ego feels in full charge of the message. But a sudden slip of the pen or a weird choice of words leaks what you actually meant to say. This small mistake is the exact spot where you break through your clean speech. This sudden gap is the subject of the unconscious. It does not live deep inside your head as a solid self, but only shows up when your everyday talk trips over its own feet. Language is a pre-existing grid of words running before you are born. When your living body is forced into this machine, you must use its words to ask for what you need. This trade splits you clean in two. On one side, you become a split subject, represented only by the words of the system. On the other side, your raw life that cannot be spoken falls away, leaving a silent gap at your core.
Most of the time, you think that your deepest self is kept in a locked room deep inside your own mind. But your whole inner life runs on words and rules that were handed down to you from the outside, much like a clock running on wheels and springs built by a clockmaker you have never met. When this machinery runs, it always leaves a tiny, unplaceable friction behind. This leftover, which the system can neither resolve nor wipe out, but keeps circling around, is the cause of your desire. It is a speck of raw, unnameable life, a leftover that does not fit into the words but still sets up your deepest wants. This means that the very thing that makes you who you are is a strange outside object sitting right at your center, steering your life from the inside out. Language does not work like a set of name tags stuck onto real things. If you look at how we actually speak, no word has any meaning all by itself. Think of how a mosaic pattern shows a picture. A single tiny stone in a mosaic cannot make an image on its own. It only does its job because it is a different color from the stones right next to it. If the whole wall were covered in one flat shade of blue, that blue would stop meaning anything at all. It would just be a blank space with no shape. This is exactly how words produce meaning. We do not pin down what a word means by tying it to a real thing we can touch. We only know what a word is by seeing how it is not all the other words we could have said instead. Every word we use is just a slot in a giant grid of differences, and it only works because it stands apart from the rest.
We usually think that a word connects directly to a clear concept in our head. But there is a thick, solid line right between the spoken word and the concept we want to point to. This line acts as a hard wall that nothing can cross. Think of a thick sheet of glass. On top of the glass, we slide a paper label. Underneath the glass, there is a shifting shadow showing the concept we want to pin down. We can press the label hard against the glass, but the paper can never drop down to touch or blend with the shadow on the other side. The label stays on our side of the glass, and the concept stays locked underneath. Because of this line, our spoken words can never sink down to grab hold of their meanings. Instead, the words just slide sideways across the top of the glass, bumping only into other words, while the actual meaning constantly slips away down below. Before we learn to speak, our physical life is just one big, unbroken field of raw feeling. Every patch of skin, every inner organ, and every shift in temperature runs together in a single continuous buzz where hunger, warmth, and touch cannot even be told apart. But when we start using words, this whole setup is chopped to pieces. Language acts like a sharp wire grid pressed down on a soft surface, carving our living flesh into separate, tidy, labeled zones. Each time we hear and use a name for a specific spot, we draw a hard boundary around it and cut it off from the rest of our physical self. When we learn to label things like the mouth, the eyes, or the gut, we build walls that stop our inner energy from moving freely. This slicing process turns a wild, living mass into a neat set of boxed-off coordinates, shutting down the raw flow of feelings so that only a few chosen spots are allowed to light up. As a result, you are left with a body that has been carved up for good, forever sliced into pieces, and made silent by the very words used to point it out. To talk about the world, we swap real things for words. Instead of dragging a heavy table into a conversation, you use its name. This swap kills the raw reality of the object. It is like sketching a silhouette of a bird and letting the bird itself fly away. The sketch is safe, but the living bird is gone. By naming the world, you kill the actual thing to turn it into a bloodless mark. Language only rules you by first clearing away what it describes. You repeat your habits endlessly, getting a painful satisfaction from always missing the mark. This smooth cycle only breaks when you hit a raw barrier that halts the movement, leaving you facing an unmapped gap. Imagine being placed in a room with two companions, each of you wearing a white disc on your back. Pause. Small. You know there are 3 white discs and 2 black ones in total. Pause. Medium. To find your own color, you can only observe your companions. Pause. Small. If you see 2 black discs, you know you are white instantly. Pause. Medium. But since everyone wears white, no one moves. Pause. Small. This hesitation is what triggers your realization. Pause. Medium, you think. If you were wearing a black disc, your companions would have already worked out their own color and walked out the door. Pause. Small. Since they are still standing there, you must be white. Pause. Medium. You do not find out who you are by looking inside. Pause. Small. You only find out by tracking the delay in the actions of the others. Pause. Medium. To keep from getting stuck in this hesitation, you must jump in and claim your spot before they do. Normally, an ordinary conversation runs for a set duration, letting your ego plan its story so nothing painful slips out. In clinical practice, there is no timer. Instead, the session is cut short the moment you hit a sharp point of anxiety. This sudden stop is like dropping a heavy curtain in the middle of a play. It breaks your safe, steady flow and leaves you stuck with the raw words you just spoke. By ending the session without warning, the ego is stopped from patching over the break, forcing you to carry that open gap home. Your daily talk is just a filler loop, like a water wheel spinning in a dry riverbed. This mindless stream is how your ego blocks out any real shock. But the loop always jams. A sudden slip of the tongue or a blank spot freezes the flow. Inside that quick crack, your ego drops its guard and you are laid bare. If talk flows without any sharp stops, your ego can easily set up its next moves and hide its mistakes. It is like an automatic loom that cleans up your errors before you can even spot them. But if you cut the talk at the very moment a slip happens, that grip breaks down. This sharp stop makes you look at the broken word right away, before your ego can clean up the mess or patch over the hole. The ego runs like a repeating clockwork, playing the same safe cycle over and over to keep things steady. When you speak, you try to keep this cycle going so you never have to look at what is missing. The intervention breaks this flow by stopping you right in the middle of a sentence. This sudden block stops your ego from wrapping up its neat story, forcing you to face the raw gap in your desire. You start out believing that you run your own life. You think your ego is a single solid thing that makes all your moves, like steering a carriage down an empty street. But every now and then, you make a weird slip. You say the wrong name to your employer, or you walk away from someone you really want to keep, and you cannot work out why you did it. This is not a simple mistake. It is the exact moment when the smooth face of your ego cracks open. This crack is where you finally stand face to face with the split that makes you a barred subject. You are no longer looking at a clear mirror, but instead you are staring right at the sharp break where your own mind is torn in two.
A grandfather clock chimes on a loop. You fall back into bad habits the exact same way. Your ego says it wants to fix a past mistake, but your inner drive runs this loop just to fail. This failure pays out a painful satisfaction. To keep this satisfaction going, you chase ordinary everyday things, thinking they are what you want. But the real driver is the cause of your desire, which sits behind the scenes. You must keep missing the mark to keep the whole loop spinning.
Meaning does not grow slowly in a steady flow. It only locks into place when a chain of words comes to a hard stop. Think of writing a letter without folding it into an envelope. The words can mean anything until you make the cut. Your ego keeps you talking in a smooth, unbroken stream, so that your thoughts never have to settle into one painful truth. When the session is cut, it acts like putting a heavy period at the end of a run-on sentence. This sudden freeze isolates the very last word you spoke, locking its meaning in place before you can water it down. You are then left to stand before this raw piece of speech with no more words to hide behind.
When you run fresh fruit through a metal press, a clump of dry pulp is always left behind. This is exactly what happens when your living body goes into language. To talk, you must squeeze your life into a stiff grid of ready-made words. But these words can never hold the whole wet shape of your body. Part of you is dropped to make the speech fit. This silent leftover does not go away. It stays in the background as a heavy, useless scrap you can never speak or throw away. This silent remainder is the cause of your desire.
Hearing your own voice echo back in a hollow space splits you in two. This echo turns your voice into a remainder, which breaks your ego and locks you in as a barred subject.
When you listen to someone speak, you think you're only picking up the meaning of their words. But if you strip away all the actual information from what they are saying, a strange leftover remains. This leftover is not the physical sound shaking your eardrums. It is more like the phantom ringing you hear in a quiet room when the bell has stopped tolling. You check your surroundings, absolutely sure you heard a sudden ring, but the air is totally silent. The sensation of being called was real, even though the physical sound did not exist. You cannot see this signal, but you still feel a silent, heavy pressure that forces you to listen anyway. This tracking signal is the voice acting as the cause of your desire. It does not carry any actual message or instruction, but it still commands your total attention. It is a structural gap that haunts you by making you feel like someone is constantly demanding something from you, even when the room goes completely quiet.
When you read silently to yourself, the tiny muscles in your throat still twitch in secret. This twitching is not the voice, which remains a silent remainder. Rather, this bodily trace proves you are split, caught between what your ego consciously thinks and the unconscious message that actually drives you.
Pulling a trigger on a crossbow fires a preset arrow, not one built on the spot. You work the same way. Your actions feel like fresh choices, but words have already set up the path as a waiting motor command in your muscles. Your ego only steps in at the very end to take credit.
A water regulator keeps a tank at a steady level. You do not work this way. Inside you, a constant pressure runs without stopping. Unlike a water wheel that stops when the stream goes dry, this pressure never shuts off or gets satisfied. It simply loops around an empty spot to reach a painful kind of satisfaction. Every time it loops, it crashes into a hard, unbendable wall that cannot be changed or bypassed. We are shaped from the start by a social pattern, a preset checklist of roles like the dutiful child or the reliable neighbor. Fitting into these standard paths does not just shape us, but cuts us in two. The moment you try to live through these preset lines, you become a split subject that can never fully merge with the checklist. This cutting process leaves behind a stubborn leftover, the cause of your desire. This leftover is not a part of your identity, but a plug that fills the gaps in the social pattern. It works like a folded scrap of paper jammed under a wobbly table leg, keeping your everyday reality steady. When this plug slips out of place, the template fails and your whole routine falls apart. Every time you speak, your throat must tighten to squeeze out sound. This physical pinch happens before words mean anything. For you, this tension is a leftover of the body that cannot be turned into language, acting as the cause of your desire. Like the vibration of a string in a musical instrument, this grip anchors the voice to your body. You might think the goal of addressing your life is to patch up your ego and make you feel whole, but it only makes you see that you are always split. Instead of trying to fix this inner gap, you learn to live with your division without letting it wreck your life. You cannot talk about yourself without splitting in two. To say who you are, you write a description on a piece of paper. There is your flesh and blood body holding the pen, and there is the text on the paper. They never meet. This break between the speaker and the written word makes you a split subject. Your ego is just a patch to cover the crack. This split happens because learning to speak cuts right through you, leaving behind a small, lost scrap of bodily satisfaction. This leftover is the cause of your desire. It works like a spark that turns on your wanting, standing in for this loss to keep us running after the next thing to acquire.
Think of a simple strip of paper. If you cut it, twist it once, and stick the ends back together, the two separate sides disappear. A pen line drawn down the middle will cover the whole surface and meet itself without crossing an edge. This loop shows how you relate to the cause of your desire. You assume your inner life is separate from the public world. But here, the inside and the outside run on the exact same track. What you chase out in the world is actually your own core.
When a heavy flywheel spins, it gets hot at the bearing just from running. The basic urge in you does the exact same thing, heating up as it loops over and over around the cause of your desire. This endless circling builds up friction, throwing off the wasted heat we call painful satisfaction. Buying a new coat feels good, but wearing it home kills the buzz. Pause, one's X. Yet this letdown does not stop you, because missing the mark gives you an extra kick to find the next item. Pause, 1.5 seconds. This leftover rush is surplus satisfaction. Pause, 1 second. It keeps you locked in a loop, chasing the next object, because the chase itself feels good. Think of friction. When you were born, you had to use words to get what you wanted, creating a steady drag that slowed down every wish. This drag splits you, turning you into a split subject. This block is where you first start to speak. Instead of looking for peace, you chase a painful satisfaction that hurts. Rather than letting out this extra weight, you set up endless cycles to keep it going. We see this in pacing the floor long after the day is done. This mindless movement does not ease the tightness, but serves as the hook that keeps the satisfaction alive. To play a game, you must choose a pre-made token to represent you on the board. Likewise, you must slip into a ready-made slot of speech to show up in the world. This is your position, where you are pinned down to chase the cause of your desire and find satisfaction.
Speaking splits you, making you a split subject. You try to tape this gap shut with your ego, but it always slips. You cannot fix this cut. You must live inside it and let the empty spot keep you moving. You only start talking because there is an empty silence between you and the world that you feel forced to fill. To fill it, you must pack your thoughts into words. But words can never hold your thoughts perfectly, which means every sentence you say leaves behind a small leak of quiet. This leak acts like a sudden break in a line, where the voice goes dead and you feel a sharp panic that forces you to keep talking just to make sure the connection is still there. This empty pull that causes you to speak is the cause of your desire, the missing piece that hooks you and drags you forward to keep piling up words. When you listen to someone talk, your mind works to pull the words out of the physical sound. If the speaker makes a wet clicking sound with their tongue, that noise does not fit into any word. Because you cannot turn this physical noise into a useful symbol, you must drop the noise to make sense of what is said. This leftover sound, which has no meaning but is still heard by your ear, is the cause of your desire. When you listen to someone talk, the words come out in a steady line and you cannot fix what they mean while the sound is still running. Each new word changes the setup of everything you just heard, keeping the whole message up in the air. To make sense of the stream, you must wait for a hard stop, like a latch snapping shut at the end of a line. The moment this stop is reached, it works backward to freeze the meaning of all the earlier words at once, locking the whole message in place. When you speak, your voice splits from your body like a delayed echo. This delay separates the raw voice from the meaning of your words, leaving it behind as the cause of your desire. You are left listening to a phantom echo you cannot claim. When you miss the cause of your desire, the cycle starts over. It works like repeating a word in a dark room. Each repetition gets faster until this speeding beat takes the place of the goal. This runaway rush is your painful satisfaction. Every word you use to think already lives out in the physical world, printed on pages, kept in books, and spoken by others long before you are born. To think or speak at all, you must pull this shared language from the outside into your own thoughts. Because you did not make this system, you do not control how the words hook together or what they mean. This means you do not run the show from the inside. Therefore, your unconscious is not a private drawer locked deep inside your skull, but an off-center loop running in the open between you and the world.
A completely smooth wax tablet has no sides. It is just one endless surface where you cannot tell where one part ends and another begins. To make a division, you must first do something physical to the surface. By dragging a sharp point across the wax to make a single deep scratch, you break the smoothness. This scratch sets up a hard line that makes a left side and a right side appear. Without this first cut, everything stays a single, messy smear where nothing can be kept apart. You can only come into being once this hard line is put down. By cutting the space in two, this first mark pins you to a single, clear spot and stops you from fading back into the flat background. At the very start, you do not feel your body as a single solid object. Instead, you only feel a scattered mess of twitching muscles and clumsy broken-up movements. This physical mess cannot glue itself together from the inside. To fix this, you must look outside of yourself and lock onto a smooth, finished shape, like a clean reflection in a mirror. By copying this steady outer outline and pretending it is you, you set up a fake boundary for your physical self. This visual shell is the ego, and it is the only thing that holds your scattered parts in one piece. You do not move in a straight line to get what you want. Instead, you run in a tight, endless loop around the cause of your desire. To feel how this works, think of spinning a heavy wheel in a circle with a dry axle. The wheel cannot roll smoothly. It scrapes hard against the mounting on every single turn, getting hot and fighting the push. But this drag does not stop the loop. The fight against the drag is what keeps the whole thing moving. The raw heat made by this steady scraping is exactly what we call painful satisfaction. A theater play relies on a short pause between scenes to let the stage hands move the props. The ego works in the exact same way, needing a tiny beat of time to go back and clean up a slip of the tongue before it sinks in. When the session is cut off the very split second the slip happens, that delay is destroyed. Stopping the talk immediately deprives the ego of the time it needs to run its patch. Without that extra moment to rewrite the mistake, you cannot edit the track, leaving you stuck in the raw, unedited break in your speech.
If you feed two clashing sheets of paper into a mechanical press at the exact same time, the machinery jams. The rollers keep spinning, but the paper cannot move forward or backward, leaving it jammed in the middle. This mechanical lockup shows exactly how you freeze. You run on rules, and when you receive two demands that flatly fight each other, you have no pathway to make a choice. Because you cannot follow one command without breaking the other, your behavior stops completely. Yet, your ego will not accept this standstill, and keeps trying to force the broken setup to run. This useless grinding does not clear the block, but instead packs the friction tighter, trapping your satisfaction right at the point of the breakdown. When you speak, you are trying to put yourself into words. But because words are just a set of standard labels, they cannot hold your entire being. This means a part of you is always left out of what you say. This leftover is the cause of your desire, which is like the silent pause after you drop a letter into an envelope. Because the words do not show your real self, you try to look for yourself in that silent gap. But you cannot stay in the spoken words and in the gap at the same time. The moment you try to step into that silent gap to find who you are, you drop out of the conversation entirely. You fade away from your own speech, which leaves you behind as a split subject. A huge tapestry of words is already woven and running long before you are born. This system works like a pre-laid road that does not care who travels on it. To speak or even to know what you want, you have to plug your raw bodily needs into this setup. This hard hookup is what turns you into a subject. From that moment on, your wants can no longer move freely because they are pushed onto these pre-laid tracks, which means your desire is locked into running only where the tapestry lets it go.
A traveler following a map does not have to think about where they are going at every turn. They simply obey the markings on the parchment telling them when to steer left or right. Daily life works the same way, giving you a steady feed of outside rules and tasks that keep you moving. But if the map is lost and the path disappears, this stream of instructions stops. With no markings left to obey or fight against, you can no longer figure out your next move based on what something else wants. This sudden silence forces you to decide on your own, bringing you face to face with your own pure desire.
We wrap our lives in a tight grid of words to keep everything running in a smooth loop. This grid only works because each word links directly to the next to explain what we see. But a raw physical blow lands entirely outside this chain of labels. When the shock hits, the link between the bodily impact and the word grid snaps immediately. Your mind searches for a matching label, finds a blank, and the whole system freezes like a jammed clock. This sudden shutdown leaves you with a dead silence, showing the exact spot where your word system fails to work. This dead silence is not a scary darkness. It is the only place where you are free from the demands of the world. The system has run its course and jammed, leaving you standing in the gap. You are no longer a toy being spoken about by others. You are the void itself, the empty space where a new word can finally be written.
The clock stops ticking. The needle jumps off the record. The session ends. You step out of the room. The street outside is quiet. The world does not need you to explain it anymore. You are simply there, split, but finally at home in the division.